Hey, Thrivers, I am Bobby Staten, Chief of Clarity, and this is Business Done Better, where we are building thriving organizations where both people and profits grow. Today, today, I have the distinct honor and privilege of welcoming a compassionate friend, daughter, sister, auntie, award winning $1 million agency owner, super dope, creative, and strategist. I mean, I'm talking about a real life unicorn here, y'all. Where else can you find someone that can craft a marketing strategy all the way down to deliverables, whip up some coquito, and rap freeways burst on what we do bar for bar? Are you kidding me? Like, this is unprecedented. All right. Ladies and gentlemen, I love to welcome the millennial CEO herself, Octavia. Welcome to Business Done Better.
Hello, Bobby. Thanks for having me. Hello, everyone.
Absolutely, my absolute pleasure. Today, we're going to talk about a little bit of everything, but I think just as context for the conversation, I think it's so important to talk about why I was so amped about getting you on the platform. We've worked together before in various capacities. I've been a client of yours, you've been a client of mine. And one of the things that was always so inspiring to me is how authentically you showed up, regardless of what the situation was. You were always true to who you were. And so we'll talk about that a little bit more today. But before we go down that road, I was wanted to start at the beginning, right? From what I know, you grew up in Jersey City, moved to Atlanta for school, but let's start at like the beginning, right? In those early years, what are some of like your early remembrances, if you will, of like things that you did creatively where you were just like, all right, I might be a little different with this.
Yes, that's a great question. So I come from a family of creatives. I would like to say we get it from my grandmother. She was a scrapbooker. She made the centerpieces at the church. So I remember as a young kid, I did a lot of like arts and crafts and creative activities, whether it was like taking clay and baking it and making it into different pieces of art around the house. So I would say I've always been creative. I come from a family of creatives. Everyone personally did it more so as a hobby. And
Mm,
I would say around the age of 14, my uncle introduced me to Photoshop, and that kind of changed the game for me. That's when I
wow.
started really taking my skills more into like that digital space, and really exploring graphic design, web design. Of course, at the time, I didn't know that I would pursue a career within that field. But as I got older and continued to kind of really hone my skills, I decided pretty early on that that's what I wanted to do. And even back then, I knew that I wanted to own an agency one day and get
Word.
out the hood, right? But
Yeah,
it's
yeah, for sure.
I never imagined rather that I would start an agency at such a young age. But yeah, I come from a family of creatives. It's in my blood. I still to this day love to be creative, painting, sculpting, making art, just getting my hands dirty. So it's something that I've always enjoyed.
I love it. And is your uncle, is he a designer as well? What was kind of his experience in Photoshop, or did he just plant a
Right.
seed and let you take it from there?
I would say is a self-taught designer.
Okay.
So he's the person in the family when we need like artwork or illustrations, we kind of go to him because he has a very
Oh,
unique and keen eye. Back in the day, when I was around, I want to say like the age of 10 or 11, my family had a t-shirt line. So they actually set up a printing press in my grandmother's basement where they took my uncle's artwork
wow.
and did screen printing. But back then it was more so around sit around the church. My grandmother was
Okay.
very religious. So a lot
Okay.
of the artwork was God is good and things of that sort. And I kind of got a chance to see taking an idea or a piece of art and translating that into something that people would want to purchase. But yeah, unfortunately, he's not a graphic designer. In his mind, he is.
Okay.
But yeah, he really did plant that seed. And I told him,
Yeah.
to this day, he's one of the reasons why I think I pursued graphic design as a professional career.
That's dope. I mean, there's so much in there, right? I think it's the not just the creative piece, right? The expression, the design, bringing something that starts here into fruition. But then it's also like the business aspect of it too. Like, yo, we're going to take the resources that we have and we're going to make something happen with it, right? Bring the printing press to grandma's house. We're going to make these shirts and we're going to push them out. I think that I mean, those two core things, right? From a business perspective, what I heard there was not only, you know what I'm saying, sales, but fulfillment, right? Like
Mhm.
you kind of got a real early exposure to two very fundamental concepts I think would be key to any business owners. So that's super dope. What would you, so do you recall what your first, like, what would you say your first graphic design was that you did on your own in Photoshop?
I would say in high school, this was when MySpace was very popular and I was learning how
Yeah,
to code. I used to design all the MySpace and Black Planet profile pages for all of my friends. So custom
word.
fonts and their colors. And that's when I really started like leaning into it. So I would say
Yeah,
shout out to the throwback social media networks that we used to
for
have.
sure.
But that's kind of how I got started out and then it kept growing from there.
What was your MySpace handle?
Oh, I do not remember.
I think
It's
mine was something.
years.
Right. Look, I'm over here thinking about what mine might have been. So, like, for me, MySpace, around the MySpace time, that was when like No Limit Cash Money were like popping.
Mhm.
Like, they had the streets on lock. So I
Right.
was big into like Lil Wayne, the Hot Boys, but I was also
Mhm.
taking Spanish classes.
Oh,
Wait till you hear
okay.
what so my username was Chico Caliente.
Oh, wow.
My
That's hilarious. That is hilarious.
So random, so exceptionally random. But to your point, it's like even saying that now, I'm like, yeah, that was pretty lame, but whatever. Um, so tell me about so now you're in high school, you're really kind of building your chops around like design. You're
Mhm.
getting familiar with tools now to how to take some of these ideas that you have in mind and bringing them forward digitally. Tell me about your transition from, okay, I'm doing this as a hobby, this is cool, to no, I want to pursue this like on an academic level and really go to art school. Tell me about how that transition was for you.
Yeah, so in Jersey, I went to one of the top high schools in the state, and they were more so focused on like academics. So I didn't necessarily come from a lot of like formal art training. But
Right.
again, I think when you're an artist or a creative, like you either have that eye or you don't.
You don't.
So I
That's right.
realized early on I had that eye, and of course, everyone's like, well, what are you going to do for college? What are you going to do? What are you going to do? So,
Sure.
just doing a bunch of research, I was like, oh, wait, people get paid to do graphic design. I'm going to do that. I already enjoy it and I already love it. So, being
Right.
from the tri state area, never having been on a plane or leaving the tri state area, I said, okay, let me research some art schools. The
Sure.
movie ATL had just came out with or Lauren London rather. And I was like, I want to go to ATL. It's popping. What's up? So
Yeah.
I applied to SCAD Atlanta, got in, and decided that's where I was gonna go. Moved to Atlanta, and I've been here for 17 years and haven't left yet. So
Yeah, that's wow. So like I would imagine, just given the context that you just provided, I would imagine that there was some level of like culture shock, right? As we know, up top, down south, completely different cultures, right? The grind is different, the language is different, interactions are different. Like, what was that like when you stepped foot on Atlanta soil? Like, what was that like for you? Like, was it like, nah, I'm going home, I'm good? Or did you kind of like find your lane and settle in? How did that work out?
So I think I find with like most of us Northerners, we either love the South or we hate it. I fell in love with it. For sure, definitely a culture shock, walking down the street and someone says, "Hey, how you doing?" I wasn't used to that. Looking around like, why are people talking to me? Right? So that southern hospitality, you certainly don't necessarily have that up north. So I would say that was like the biggest culture shock. But what I really loved about Atlanta was the fact that there were entrepreneurs and professionals who look like me. So just
Yeah,
again, going back to being from the hood, even though my family had this like side hustle business, they all were working regular 9 to 5 jobs where they
sure.
cared about their pension and stuff like that. And
Yep,
I think here, just seeing like Black entrepreneurs, female entrepreneurs was really inspiring for me.
for sure.
And the culture here is definitely very much like welcoming. People want to
Yeah,
help each other. And then even going to SCAD, I was one of the few students at the time who took advantage of their career site. where
Mm,
different businesses would post opportunities because they were looking for students. I was on that
right.
website all the time. Like my career advisor
Right.
used to be like, "Girl, you on it." So anytime somebody posted, I was able to like apply and get the gigs, and that's how I was able to really like build up my clientele as a freelancer, even in college.
So wait, this wasn't like, because this is an interesting not concept, but it differs from like my experience. So when I was in school, we had a career center, but more often than not, they were just looking for people to fill like for internships in the summer or full-time gigs post grad.
Mhm.
What I think I heard from you is that the SCAD career side, which may have been doing some of that too, it was also like, nah, while you're in school, here's some in-field experience that you can get during the semester. Is that right?
Yep, that's correct. That's not
Wow.
necessarily for credit. It was more like
Good.
a job essentially. But I
Yeah,
think me taking advantage of that, that's how I got a lot of experience working with clients my junior and senior year, which I feel like kind of put me ahead of the curve once I graduated, and decided to eventually pursue my agency full time.
I love it. I love it. I wish, more, and I'm not saying that this is not par for the course. 'Cause I haven't been in school in a grip, so that may very well be the case. But like, I think that there's what you learn in the classroom is great, but nothing
Mhm.
trumps experience, right?
Right.
And so being able to apply the concepts and the things that you're learning in real time in industry, I can only imagine what that did for you in terms of like being able to connect the dots. But
Mhm.
also, you're building relationships with local people, right? So
Mhm.
like, like post grad, hey, remember those projects I worked for, whatever the case may be, these people now. So when you choose to step out of your own or when you graduate and you're looking for full-time employment, there's also relationships that are intact, not,
Right.
way out in Minneapolis somewhere. These are folks that are right around the corner. How
Right.
did that, how did those relationships, those connections translate once you left SCAD? Like what, and I'm kind of jumping ahead, but I want to go here anyway. Like, how did those kind of like support you once you were done with your program?
That's a great question. So after graduating, I still continue to utilize SCAD's career website and build my network. Even when I graduated, I got a full-time job. Working in corporate, hated it, but I was able to continue to work with those clients. Back then, you were either a designer or a developer. You were not both. Like now, the world has transitioned. Everybody wants you
Mm.
to do everything. So I was a unicorn back then because I knew how to design and I knew how to code. So I could do websites and branding. So that allowed me to get like even more types of clients in terms of like expanding my network. So when I decided to continue to freelance, I just told that, my current clients, like, hey, I'm doing this full time. And they were able to support me, give me more work, give me more projects, and really be patient with me, understand that I was a student. Back then, I had to like Google like a graphic design contract because I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know what
Yeah,
copyrights were, things of that sort.
right.
So it was like really a learning process for me. And I'm very thankful to those early clients that I had. But I've always been a hustler. I remember not only using SCAD's website, I used to use Craigslist. I designed a little flyer, and every day I would repost my Craigslist flyer and I would get leads that way. And I got clients from Craigslist as well when that used to be more popular.
Wait a minute. Now this is the first. You trying to tell me the same website that we use to get bed frames and everything else you use to get gigs?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Wow. I want to, if I had a little pad over here with sounds, I would definitely, like, that's a bar. Like, what? I think people need to really like tap into that. Like, opportunity is everywhere. That's what I took away from that, right? Like, don't, especially as entrepreneurs, creatives, whatever the case may be, like, we oftentimes get so laser focused on where we perceive opportunity to be that we overlook stuff that's like right here. You know what I'm
Yep.
saying? Like Craigslist is something that, again, we've probably been conditioned. I don't know what it's doing right now, but we conditioned to
Right.
think of it one way. But you found a way to create your own space, your own opportunity within it that resulted in bread. Like
Mhm.
that's that's innovation. I told you I see a unicorn. Um, so let's talk about like, was there a moment while you were like, you know, on the SCAD career site doing your coursework, you know what I'm saying, working your internships, whatever the case may be, what was the moment where you were just like, I want to own my own agency? Or was that after school? Where in the journey did that light bulb go off for you?
So the light bulb went off, I would say, since I was like a teenager. I knew I always wanted to own my own
You
business.
already knew. Okay.
Yeah. But as a teenager, I used to say, when I turn 30, I'm gonna open my own firm because I thought 30 was like old, right? I thought that's grown.
I get it. Yeah, I did
When I
too.
graduated college, I realized when I was looking for jobs at agencies, they were all owned by white men. The
Mm,
team was not diverse at all. There was just no one that looked like me. I
yeah.
took a job at a startup that did strategic planning software for hospitals, not sexy at all. I was the only creative, I was the only person of color. And I
Wow.
just felt like this is not something that I want to pursue long term.
Right.
Ironically enough, the CEO at the time, I told him like, look, I want to own my own agency, and he was like, bet I see that in you. I see a lot of leadership skills in you, and I support you. So he would
Right.
let me leave during my lunch break and go meet with clients. Like he didn't care as long as I got my work done at the office. He didn't care what I was doing on the side. So his support through that first job really helped me build up that clientele and get it to a point where, okay, I have enough clients for Creative Juice, or at least my freelancing business, where I can quit my full-time job and launch an agency. And that's kind
Yeah.
of how this transition happened. But it was really due to just seeing that there was a lack of diversity when it came to agency ownership, and wanting to
Right.
kind of change that is really what sparked that fire for me to launch Creative Juice and do it full time.
I love it. So how long did you stick around in the startup before you were just like, all right, I'm out? Like I'm
I worked a corporate job as a graphic designer for a year, and then I went to the startup for 8 months, and then
okay.
that's when I left and did my thing. So it's funny because even now, when I talk to people, I don't necessarily have that corporate experience that most people have because I started my business at 23. So I only have like a couple of years working under
Yeah,
somebody. Most of
right.
my career has been me working for myself.
And I think sometimes people view that as like a negative. I think the
Mhm,
dope part of and I don't think it is. I think the dope part about that is that you, for me, so I was on the opposite end of the spectrum. Before I started my business, I was in corporate for 12 years. The first 2 years after I left corporate was unlearning and
mhm,
relearning, right? There was a whole period of like unconditioning that I had to go through to be able to recognize true opportunity, really take ownership and hone my gifts, my talents, and identify what skills I needed to develop.
mhm.
Whereas in your case, you tell me if you see this differently, you were like that indoctrination hadn't really happened like that. Like you got enough to see kind of like what you needed to do, how you needed to move and shake. But for the most part, you were able to kind of keep it, going the way that you were used to because the conditioning hadn't really set in like that. Would you agree or do you see that differently?
I would agree. I think earlier in my career, because I didn't necessarily know what I was doing per se. Like I knew the craft of graphic design and web design, but I knew nothing about the business side, right? So it was a
Yeah,
lot of trial by
yeah,
fire, and it was not fun.
yeah, for
Um,
sure.
so when I got a little bit older, I was like, oh, I wish I would have worked in corporate, or I wish I would have worked in an agency. But
Mm,
I think that building the plane while you're flying it, it is challenging, but then it also allows you to really just use your own expertise, your own skill set, your own experience, and create like a culture or a brand that you feel like really fits with who you are as a person. And I think that's what makes Creative Juice. I would say I'm naturally a problem solver. So again, not necessarily fun, not knowing what you're doing all the time. But as I got older, I realized nobody knows what they're doing all the time. And,
Right.
many entrepreneurs are becoming entrepreneurs for the first time. So yeah, I think corporate or just having a job, right? You do learn a lot of those skills, which I ended up learning through like, different courses and programs that I joined for entrepreneurs, right? Like I didn't know what an SOP was until like 3 years ago. And I've been in business
Gotcha.
for 11 years. So I
Right.
think like I had SOPs, but I didn't
Yeah.
know they were called SOPs,
Right.
right? I
Right.
think I eventually learned the more like official phrases for
Jargon. Yeah.
doing. So I think also my journey is just my journey. So yes, I'm like, oh, if I worked at an agency, I would have known the difference between an account manager and a project manager and how to price. But again, I kind of just made it up as I went along, did what I
Yeah.
think made sense for me and my clients. And,
Mhm.
it ended up being successful. I did have people earlier on say, I've been doing this for 20 years and I've never seen it done this way. And again, it didn't mean that the way that Creative Juice was doing it was wrong. It was just
Wrong.
different
Exactly.
because you have this young, scrappy millennial trying to figure it out, and she's doing what makes sense to her. And again, it might
Yes.
not be the traditional way, but it's still effective.
Absolutely. And I think, to me, and that was kind of what I was leaning towards in my comment. It's like there was a lot of room for innovation, not
Mm-hmm.
because, oh, I want to be innovative. No, out of necessity. Like you had to innovate because you're in the situation, you trying to eat, you got people you gotta pay, we got clients we gotta serve, we gotta
Mm-hmm.
make it shake however we make it shake. And then we learn
Right.
through experience. Would you say, how do you now, if that was your business experience, right? Let's just talk about Octavia, the person, the human, your learning style. Are you a person that feels like you learn best through like immersion, like throw me in and I'll figure it out? Or would you prefer to learn other ways, like, nah, like I'm a visual learner, or you tell me something, I can get it. Like, what's your like learning style? How are you wired that way?
That's an interesting question. I would say I like to learn in general, no matter where it
Love
is.
it. Yes.
Um, Like I feel like I could learn something. I've learned stuff from my high school interns before, just them
Mhm.
telling me. I'm a very inquisitive person. So anytime I meet
Right.
anybody, no matter what industry they're in, I ask a ton of questions.
Yeah.
And I'm like a little sponge. I just collect all these little data points, right? So I feel like I'm
Right.
that person that knows a little bit about a lot of things. But visually, YouTube, again, attending programming, trying to find mentors earlier in my career, asking my peer groups, reaching out to my teachers, just wherever I could learn. I took advantage of that. I would say, just based on my career, I'm probably the more throw me into the fire and I figure it out type of person
Sure.
because of how I started out. And that obviously has been successful for me. I also feel like I operate at a very high level under high stress, which is not sustainable. But again,
Sure.
it allows me to be quick thinking on my feet, which I think is important as a CEO and a leader of a company. You constantly
Right.
having to problem solve and figure stuff out. So whereas previously, early in my career, when things went left, I would be very stressed and go down this, spiral. Now that I'm a little bit more mature and experienced, every time there's a problem, I'm like, all right, let me figure
How
out
do
the
we solve
solution. It's that
it?
simple.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I love that. Yeah, no, that's great. I think that's so important. And those are the kinds of things that, at least from my vantage point, you won't learn until you have to, right?
Mhm.
Like experience is also the best teacher, right? Like it's just there's nothing that can substitute the lessons learned from bumping your head, on something and like, all right, let me shake this off. I got to get back to it. And no, I think that's super dope. Earlier, you mentioned like programs that were instrumental to like your professional development and just kind of you learning not only business concepts but also leadership concepts as well. What if you could call out one, two, however many you feel bet? What programs were like? nah, if I'm a new entrepreneur, I'm definitely want to send you there. Like, what are some of those like pivotal programs that really helped you to transform your leadership and business ownership style?
I would definitely say the Goldman Sachs 10,000 Small Business Program.
Okay.
That was like an immersive 6-week experience where I felt like I was getting a little mini MBA of
Yeah,
sorts.
that's what I've
So
heard. Yeah.
before that, I knew how to use QuickBooks Online again because I just had to figure it out as an entrepreneur. But like they really
Yeah.
broke down, like, no, this is how you read a P&L. This is how you determine like what your numbers are saying about your business. So it really kind of just took what I was learning on my own to the next level. I also more recently joined Entrepreneurs Organization, or EO for short. And that is
Yep.
a global network that has allowed me to connect with other entrepreneurs who are at least at a million and up in revenue, who see me as their peer, which is really important, right? Where we can
Mhm.
learn from each other. Because I think as entrepreneurs, we all understand how hard it is. So we just support each other because we like, look, it's hard out here. So
Yeah,
I scratch your back, you scratch mine. So I would say
for sure.
those two organizations have been very impactful in terms of like helping me take not only like my business, but my personal development to the next level.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think that's huge. And I think that's one of the things, at least for me being candid, that is an area where I wish I had devoted more resources early on. I think
Mhm.
to your point, I felt like I got my MBA out the street, like not on the corner,
Mhm.
but I'm saying like through experience, like through client interactions, through the sales process, whatever the case may be. I had to glean and learn and pull information from those variety of experiences in ways like the stuff that I've learned as an entrepreneur, I would have never gotten in corporate. Like in
Right.
corporate, I was an IT dude, right? So like while I thought at a business level, I always was thinking about enterprise like level types of things. The pigeonhole, or not even the pigeonhole, the seat that I was sitting in that I was assigned to was specific to technology, which is part of the reason why I never went back. And I'm like, nah, y'all keep putting me in this IT bucket, but the
Right.
problem is over there. You know what I'm saying? So I love that. I think what I love to also hear from you too are like when you think about like culture, right? And as a leader now of a team of people, um, and someone who has had a variety of experiences where you were the only woman of color in the room or person of color in the room, or maybe even being the youngest person in the room, right? What are some, before we go to culture, what are some things that, or is there a specific moment that was transformative for you where you were able to stand 10 toes down on this is who I am? Yep, I'm the youngest person in this room. I am the only woman of color in this room, but y'all gonna get this work. Like, what? Where was the opportunity where like you kind of like dusted your shoulder off and showed them who Octavia was?
I would say like earlier in my career, one of the real challenges was I felt like people just thought I was cute and like didn't take me seriously. And then when I would say, "Oh, well, I have this big client," they're like, "Well, how'd you do that?" So speaking to that unicorn, it was almost like people didn't believe me, or they're like, "Well, how'd you do this? Did someone like hand this to you?" So I think the more I just grew into like being a leader and being comfortable with like who I am and just doing a lot of self work, more like
Yeah,
personal things, like, okay, my journey is my journey.
yeah,
If my grandmother wasn't creative, it had me in arts and crafts, and then my uncle didn't introduce me in graphic design, I wouldn't have went to SCAD, da, 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 right? So it's like a domino
right,
effect. So
sure,
me just having confidence that this is my, I'm where I'm supposed to be, exactly where I'm when I'm supposed to be there. And I
okay,
think that that came over time. I remember earlier in my career, I kept getting a lot of no's. And I felt like it's because I was a woman, because I was Black, and because I was young. And it really frustrated me. And I used
yeah,
to be like, maybe I need to hire a white man to like be the face of creative juice.
I
So
hear
I
that.
struggled with
That's
that for a
nice.
while. And I was
Yeah,
like, no, but like this is me. So one thing I was always adamant about was making sure that my face and my name was on my website. there are Black owned businesses that you don't even know are Black owned because they don't put their face on their site because they don't want anybody to know they're Black owned. So I think for
Yep.
me, being authentic to who I am, only wanting to work with clients who value the perspective that I bring to the table is really important because they see that working with my agency and me having this diverse team, we really do bring like that global approach. And again, just being scrappy, we're doing things differently, we're figuring things out. So I wouldn't say it was necessarily like one moment. It's kind of like slowly happened over time where I just got more comfortable. And I think that honestly just came with age. Because
Yeah.
again, at 23, I didn't know what I was doing. I used to beat myself up.
Nobody does.
I
Right.
remember having a conversation with myself when I was around 27, saying, like, girl, why are you so hard on yourself? You're
Right.
not supposed to know what you're doing. You've never done this before. So you're gonna make mistakes.
Yep.
And I saw this
Yep.
quote the other day that really resonated with me. It said, being a millionaire, or something about being a millionaire, or the word millionaire has a couple of L's in it. And I said, huh, that's the word right there, right? So, right?
That's
So
a
yeah, I
bar.
kind of just lead into that over time and got more confident. But I would say in the beginning, it was not there.
Yeah.
But then as I consistently started doing the things that scared me, pitching the
Mm,
clients that scared me, going up against these other agencies that again were owned by people who didn't look like me, who had
right.
much larger teams. Maybe this agency been around for 20 years. I've been around for 5 years. But even for me to know, like, okay, Octavia, you're pitching this big client just like this other agency. And you only been doing this for 5 years. So you must bring something to
Yeah.
the table that these
You
brands
in the
find
room.
attractive. So that was
Yeah.
kind of like reassuring, but I think that definitely came over time.
I love that. There's so much there. I'm gonna try my best to recap because I think you said a lot. There were so many bars in what you just said. I think first and foremost, one piece of it is being willing to show up, right? I tell people all the time, in order to win the prize, you have to be in the room, right?
Mhm.
Like if you don't show up and they call your name, you're gonna miss it. They're going to the next person, right? So like I heard that piece, but then I also heard like there's a part of it that's just about recognizing like who you are and where you are, right? Like if I'm here and I have this opportunity, regardless
Mhm.
of what they look like on paper and what I look like on paper, what's real is going to resonate, right? So
Right.
I am going to show up authentically, do my very best, and let the chips fall where they may. It's almost like, I'll say this. Have you watched that Cat Williams interview yet?
Mhm.
All right. So you remember the part, I don't know if you remember the part where he was talking about how, in the comedian world where and he got up and got in Shannon Sharp's face. He's like, but if we get on this line, boy, like there was a moment where he was talking about, no, you got to have the confidence to know,
Mhm.
like, I don't care how long you've been in the weight room. I am the one, not the two.
Right.
Like,
Right.
and so being able to and show up and convey that in everything that you do, I think is a huge difference maker. And an encouragement to people who might feel like, yo, I don't have it all, I don't
Mhm.
match up. But the reality is, what's yours is yours,
Right.
right? Like,
Mhm.
even you can't mess it up. So if
Yeah.
it's yours to have, you'll have it. And then
Right.
the last thing I think I heard you say that I think was huge is, dang, I just lost it. I'm gonna scrap it and keep it moving. It'll come back, but
Taking
I'm gonna scrap it and keep it moving. Taking
taking the
L, yeah, that's a huge one too, right? So like you hear it a lot, especially in the business world, like fail fast, and I think that there's a lot of value to that very simple and short statement. It's like you'll never know what you're truly capable of unless you try, and if you fail,
right.
so what? You either win or you learn. It's not a loss, right? Like you learn something new, you apply those learnings to the next opportunity, and you keep trucking forward. And I think, equipped with those things, that can be huge for anybody who's either in business and accelerating to new levels, or somebody who's just starting out. I think that truth will resonate with anybody, regardless of what phase you're in.
Right.
Um, Let me ask about your. So we've talked a lot about like the variety of experiences that you've had from back home at the crib to
Mhm.
SCAD to being here in Atlanta, being around all these wonderful, beautiful, brilliant Black creatives and entrepreneurs. How if I'm thinking about this, I like to eat, so I'm gonna bring it back to food. If we think
Mhm.
about all of those things, right, like a pot of gumbo, right? We throw all of those ingredients in and they're simmering. I want to that pot of gumbo is your creative approach. How do you take your experiences and all of the different things that you've seen and pulled and learned from all of these different sources? How does that inform your creative approach when you're engaging a new client? You're thinking about strategy. You all are talking about like design concepts. How does all of that come through for you?
Yeah, I think that for me, I like to take a very strategic approach with my clients and put myself in their position. So I act as the creative director within my organization. And I think that that's important because I tell my clients, I understand you as a business owner. Like, I understand how to be strategic. I understand that you need an ROI, right? That you got to go back to somebody and justify this spend,
Yep.
but then I'm also creative. So being able to speak both sides of the coin is really important. And I think that also, even though I didn't spend a lot of time in corporate, I have a lot of corporate clients. So I was able to kind of learn that culture as well. So one of the things we like to say at Creative Juice is we're bridging the gap between corporate and culture, because I feel
Yeah.
like as we could speak to both sides. As you mentioned, I know what Christian Rock and Blueface is talking about on Instagram, right? But then I can also
Yeah.
talk about the Rabbit R1 little handheld device that just came out that's going to revolutionize AI. So it's like keeping myself in different industries and keeping myself updated, continuing to learn and grow, and bringing that back to my team is really, really important. And looking at
Yeah.
my client again as a strategic partner, we want to grow with them. I value those clients most who can pick up the phone and call me and say, "Hey, I loved working with you, but here are the two things or one thing that I feel like could have been different or how my experience could have been better." And that allows us to grow as an agency. So I think just generally speaking, me having that thirst again to learn. I'm kind of a perfectionist, but understanding that there is no such thing as perfectionism, is always progress. And as long as
Woo.
I'm just 1% better than I was yesterday, I'm okay, and really not
Winning.
being so up about it. So yeah, I think all of these learned and lived experiences are really important because they do shape how I run my agency. They shape the types of people that I hire, and then they also shape the types of clients that we work with. It's important to me that my clients are in alignment with what my agency represents, and similarly in alignment with some of my personal core values.
Yeah, no, for sure. God, I love that. I love that. What you talked about your team. I think I'm going to highlight a problem that I see a lot in the agency world, and I love to hear your take on how you've kind of addressed it within your own agency. One of the things that I see, I work with a lot of agencies that are most of them, everybody on the team is billable, right? So they're focused on what they're getting paid to do, right? Develop
Mhm.
strategy, produce super dope creative visuals and deliverables, so on and so forth. But the internal operations piece is kind of where things get funky. Now,
Mhm.
on your end, the other part of that too is team, right? The team dynamic. A lot of times the focus is so much on delivery, delivery, delivery that there's not space created to allow for continuous learning,
Mhm.
innovation, things like that, right? I was talking to an agency the other day. I did a workshop with them, and they were like, "Marketing automation, what's that?" I'm like, 2024. Like,
Mhm.
what do you mean? So I say that to say, like, but in their situation, they're 100% capacity. Like, they don't have time to learn anything new. They're focused on delivery. How have you fostered a culture of creativity and innovation within your agency that would differentiate your team from another team?
That's a good question. I think one of the main pieces of value that we bring is having a diverse team.
Yeah,
So before COVID, we had a physical space in Atlanta. Everybody was in Atlanta. When
yep,
COVID happened and I decided to close the office, I said to myself, well, I can hire anybody from anywhere because now I have an office. So that
yeah,
to expand my workforce into a global workforce, which took
that's
us to
huge.
another level in terms of, again, bringing those different perspectives to the table. I also like to hire people who, again, have different expertise that I do not have. And then I try
Yeah,
to learn from them as well. And then I try to foster an environment of collaboration where we're all problem solving together. So I tell my team up front, I don't have all the answers, but I'm willing for us to all sit down and roll up our sleeves and figure it out together. And I think that
right,
creates an environment where people feel like their voice can be heard. They can feel like their individual contribution is really making a difference within the organization. And then I think even when we do make mistakes, sitting back and saying, okay, where did we go wrong? What could we have done differently? What do we need to put in place? That's really important. And then again, even over the years, like us fine tuning who's an ideal client for us and who's an ideal team member that we should bring on board. So I think all of
mm,
that kind of coming together is what really helps us differentiate ourselves from another agency.
for
And then
sure.
also having that global workforce, pulling inspiration from not just things we see in the United States, but it could be design elements in like Latin America or Africa or different geographical regions that allow us to kind of put together this little melting pot, if you would say, of
Yeah.
creativity and ideas.
I love that. And I think the global piece is something that people can easily overlook, right? I think sometimes, God bless us as Americans, we just think we have it and know it all, and we don't. The reality is there are so many diverse perspectives, ideas, and like you said, like true elements, right? Like if you travel overseas, the architecture looks completely different than it does
Mhm.
over here, right? And so all of those things inform what your mind sees. I think that is absolutely a differentiator, and I love how you highlighted that. When you think about like what does like learning piece look like for your team, right? Like how do you make sure that there's space within like the churn of the day, right, or the week, whatever, to say, nah, I need you to make sure you know or have learned something about AI, right, or whatever the case may be. How do you make sure that folks are staying on top of trends?
Right. I would definitely be honest and say I'm probably like the driver of that in my organization. So like
Okay,
whenever I am learning something about like ChatGPT, for example, I would say in my organization, I'm currently the master at ChatGPT, but now I
yeah,
have started rolling it out into my internal team where they're starting to interact with ChatGPT. I'm always
sure,
sharing like insights. So I would say in my organization, it comes from the top down
yep,
and showing like, okay, how can we be more efficient, or how are we leveraging AI, or how are we using this new technology? That has been really important. Just making sure that I'm sharing that with the team. And then if they're finding something, hey, this will make my job easier, that I'm like, okay, let's implement it. I'm the type of person like, okay, if you feel like this is going to help, or if you want to take this course because you want to learn this skill, let's do it, because that
right,
helps you become happier within your job. And then in turn, our clients are happier. So I would say that
absolutely,
like that top down approach is really important. And just making sure that the team, in terms of like how they're learning things, I like to be a little bit hands on, especially like my designers. So because I am a designer myself, I can speak the language.
absolutely,
Even my developers, because I can develop, I can speak the language.
right,
And again, just being inquisitive and being that problem solver. If they hit a wall, I come in and say, okay, have you thought about this? Have you thought about this? Have you thought about this? And they're like, oh,
yeah,
let me try this thing, right? So I
right.
think continue to think outside the box. I feel like I create an environment that encourages us to think outside the box and try new things, even if it might not be successful. At least we've learned something.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I love that. And I'm gonna give you a quick bar for those who are listening.
Mhm.
What you just heard her say, if I could put it in a one-liner, where leadership goes, the organization flows. Like it's truly like a top-down thing, and that might not be the case for every organization, but it's important to understand that heavy is the head that wears the crown, right? So, like, as a leader, it's important to make sure that that pathway is always open and that you, not you, Octavia, but you leaders, that we are always thinking ahead and positioning not just ourselves, but the business ahead of the trends so that that information can also be disseminated throughout the organization as it comes. I heard a little bird had the word that you got something brewing over there that you might want to share with the audience. You want to take this opportunity to kind of talk about what you got coming up next?
Yes, absolutely. So, Creative Juice has been around for 11 years now, and we are a multicultural branding and marketing agency. And just over the past few years, we realized that there was like untapped potential, specifically when it comes to addressing the needs of Black and Brown audiences, as well as Black and Brown entrepreneurs. So,
Mm-hmm.
after doing some research and kind of some soul searching for me personally as well, we decided to launch a rebrand of Creative Juice that is called Chroma Creators,
I
which
love
for
it.
us was born from this insight. It's 2024, and unfortunately, there are tons of brands who still don't know how to authentically speak to and connect with communities of color. And I
Mhm.
think that because of that, an organization like Chroma Creators is really important to help build equity in Black communities and just really amplify those Black voices and experiences. So we plan on launching this rebrand of Creative Juice soon. You can check us out online. But it really came from that need there when we saw that, okay, people really don't have a clue. And then on the flip side, I am all about building equity in Black communities. So, my biggest leverage is me being an entrepreneur and being able to use what I've built to really impact other entrepreneurs. So, as a result, Chroma Creators will only be working with Black owned businesses or
Mm.
brands who need to target Black audiences. And to take it a step further, we decided internally it's not just about you as a brand coming to me saying, hey, I need Black people to spend more money with me. No, we need to
Yeah,
see the social impact piece, the nonprofit. How are you giving back to these Black communities that we're helping you reach? So just being more selective about the organizations that we're working with is really important. Again, it needs to tie back into building equity for Black communities.
I love that, and it's so needed. In the creative space, in the just straight business space, in so many spaces, there is still in 2024 such a lack of representation and such a lack of understanding that comes through. We see it all the time, right? These ads that are placed that are just like, did you really just say that? Like,
Mhm.
just craziness. So taking that back to something you said earlier in the conversation, bridging the gap between corporate and culture, it sounds like this entity is positioned to do just that.
Yes, absolutely.
I
And we're
love
really excited about it because all of my team, of course, we're all minorities, and we again have these lived experiences. So I will be honest, originally when I started my agency, I didn't want to be multicultural. I was like, I don't want you to come to me just because I'm Black. But
it.
then
Right.
as I started to grow, I realized, no, you are the expert, and so is your team because you literally lived that
Yeah,
experience.
this is
You,
you.
your aunts,
Right.
your family, your cousins, the church you go to, the organizations you're a part of, people of
Right.
color, right? So I think
Right.
for us, it's kind of just like this is my everyday life. But then when you take a step back, you're like, whoa, people don't understand it. It's Black people are so dynamic, right? And we have so many different nuances to our culture. I think it's important that we kind of like celebrate that,
For
especially
sure.
with the attacks on DEI right now. You have organizations like the Fearless Fund, being sued for giving out grant money to Black entrepreneurs. So we feel like this is the time more than ever to kind of like buckle down and say, no, we're going to stand together with our Black businesses and our Black communities to help, evoke change.
I love it. I love it. So if I am a brand and I want to partner with you specifically on the Chroma creators side, where they need to go? Where can they find you?
Absolutely. You can check us out online at chromacreators.agency.
Okay,
And you'll find a lot of information about our services, the types of clients that we work with, as well as why we feel like the work we're doing is so important. So yes, definitely check us out, spread the word, so we can continue to create some change.
I love it. I love it. Octavia, I appreciate the time today. This has been such a great conversation. My hope is that, those who are listening are able to take away, some inspiration, but also some information that they can apply to their own entrepreneurial journey or just their journey in general. I think, like I told you at the top of the conversation, your story is an inspiration. It is something that I think more people need to hear. So I'm about to put this everywhere. So
Thank you.
thank you so
Appreciate
much
it.
for your time today. And we'll see you next time. How about that?
Thanks.
My pleasure.
Hey, thank you so much for listening. I am so passionate about equipping and empowering entrepreneurs. If you can do me a favor, take a few seconds, like, comment, and subscribe to this channel, whether you're on YouTube, Facebook, or LinkedIn, doesn't matter. Let's help make sure that other people are able to experience what you just did. All right. Thank you so much for your time. I'll see you next time.